Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks. Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try and make your world a little weirder. I'm Kyle of the Night.
And I'm a Scaly Bear Nile.
Oh my God.
Now, this is the thing that is not going to work because we're not really a visual podcast, but we are. And also, this is the episode we're recording on Halloween Day that will be posted after Halloween.
It's happening
but we
after
are
Halloween.
In the spirit.
Well, November is sort of like the sequel to Halloween, right? Like it's maybe not quite as good. It doesn't keep the spirit of the original, but you watch it anyways because you love the original so much. Now, Niles dressed as a bear right now is what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I have a bear onesie that I bought for a midsummer couples cosplay.
Oh, that's right. That's what that was
a while ago. That I busted out to work from home by myself alone.
Yeah.
So that's been my Halloween so far.
And Niall,
Kyle,
what do you see before you defying the laws of the paranormal?
So I knew that you were a vampire. I was not. I totally missed the entire thing that you're referencing.
Yeah.
I only heard about it when everyone was already sick of it, and
Okay.
I never learned actually what it is. So you'll have to tell me what your whole thing is.
Look, for most people, they will see me, and to the kids who I'm passing candy out to tonight, they'll be like, "Oh, he's a Dracula." But when the shades come on, when these sunglasses come on, when the black hair dye goes in, and I gel this shit back, I become Dracula Flo, which. To tell you what it is, actually, before we started recording this episode, Niall and I had a discussion about what's funny lately. So we were kind of talking Hawk Tuah. We were talking, what are they called? The Rizzler
Costco
brothers?
boys?
But the Costco boys.
Something like whatever they're called. Yeah.
And I was talking about how funny it is because they're from New Jersey and how funny that sounds to me. And, they're saying shit like, double chocolate chunk cookie, and that makes me laugh. My enjoyment, for that and Hawk Tuah knows no bounds. And so it only is fair that I should go as a meme character. If you haven't seen Dracula Flo, it's basically an elderly, like a geriatric.
So that's why you like it. Okay.
I
should have assumed that the meme that Kyle is into is an old man doing something.
That's a part of it. That is a part of it. Yeah, he's got a lot of old man characteristics, but here's the thing. He's fucking bawling. He's dressed as Dracula. He's got sunglasses on. He's got like a fucking chain on. And he has like a sharpied like widow's peak on the top of his head, and he's just saying goofy stuff. That's the entire video, and there's like 5 or something of them. I don't know. I've only seen one video, but it made me laugh when I saw it, and I was like, yeah, I'll just be like Dracula, but I'll be Dracula Flo from the video, and I'll recite a couple lines if people ask me. Which the one that's coming to mind is we're smoking Scooby-Doo dick is one of the things that he says. You kind of got to experience it for yourself if you haven't seen it yet. But that's what I'm dressed as. And so, yeah, happy Halloween. I know this is like multiple days after the fact for the podcast, but I frankly don't give a fuck.
Yeah. Look, I keep that Halloween, that thing on me, and by thing, I mean Halloween spirit.
Yep.
You know?
Pretty much, yeah. And this isn't so, Niall. Actually, a real quick thing that's totally actually fucked.
Okay.
We've been planning at our place for a big Halloween party with a bunch of friends for like a week now. And that party's happening tomorrow. And we've been putting our entire ass into this party. This morning, our pipes backed up again.
Oh, okay. That's not good.
So we have water in our basement. Don't know if we can use toilets and stuff. So today I maybe took a drive out to run some errands, take a shit at Target.
Did you try to secure some porta potties for the party?
No. See, this is where the trouble comes in, right? Is we might have to set up a designated shitting area. I don't know. We have a couple things that you could shit into. We have like bowls and stuff.
The way that you're describing this, I can't tell if you have specially made things for shit or if you just have bowls that you're like, we'll sacrifice them for the cause.
Oh, I mean, you wash that thing out, you can use it again. But it was like, I'm talking like a big bowl that you like might mix ingredients in.
Okay, so you are talking kitchenware.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So like, yeah, I have like a sur la table bowl that folks.
La Crusade, you got a Dutch oven?
Yeah, people could maybe we could put it in a Dutch oven too. That would be good.
It's good to shit in a heavy bottom pot because then it really traps that heat in there and it doesn't let that stank out if you have the lid on.
Yeah, so. And the other thing is like we do have sort of like a fenced off area that's not a part of our house, but it's like our backyard area is very tiny and kind of let me put it this way, if we were to put the pots and things and the Dutch ovens back there, people could shit in them, and then there's plenty of poison ivy growing on in the back there that people could use to wipe. I'm not going to tell them it's poison ivy, right? Obviously.
Yeah, just say there's some great leaves out there.
There's some leaves out there you could use. So two things. We take care of the whole having to shit problem in a house with non-functioning toilets. Mm-hmm. Two, they're getting rid of the poison ivy for me. Then I don't have to do it.
One thing that I feel is important to ask in this discussion is, are you going to warn the people that are coming to your house for this party about your toilet situation before they arrive, or is that a spooky Halloween surprise upon entry?
Real talk.
After they come in and you lock the doors.
Real talk. That is a situation that we're waiting to see.
No, okay. This totally, I can change the entire. We can turn this into a positive. Okay.
Okay.
We can really make something out of this with this Halloween party.
Have you ever heard this?
Have you ever heard of these nights at bars that they call like Bladder Bust?
No, I did. Okay. No, I have not.
So the concept of a Bladder Bust is everyone can come into the bar, and drinks are like either free or like a penny or some shit. They're like super cheap wells, but only until somebody has to go to the bathroom.
What?
So you get free beer until somebody pees. And so it turns the entire night of drinking into a fucking social experiment where people are trying to disincentivize each other from using the bathroom so they can keep getting cheap drinks.
Okay, I have a couple comments on that.
Yeah.
One, there's the lady who held her wee for a wee and died. If you remember that story, there's a woman who drank a bunch of water and then held it in as a contest to. So first of all, you're already potentially facing that, but like worse because it's alcohol, right?
Right, but you're also, this won't go for a week. This is just for one night. So I don't think you're going to have an actual death situation.
Well,
I mean, if the party goes for a long time,
right? The other problem you're going to run into is like, you could potentially start sweating it out. Does that count? True. And that's sort of a question that they would have to contend with.
Well,
honestly, I'll say it's kind of a philosophical question.
Well, here's the thing. In this case, I was bringing up the yes, that is a philosophical question.
Yeah.
But I was bringing up the concept of bladder bust so that instead it's about shitting.
Right.
So the sweating out wouldn't be as much of a thing, but somebody would eventually probably have to shit. That would be when the party ends. The party ends when someone has to actually shit.
And then we take him outside, put him in on top of the bucket, and we all gather around and watch.
Sure. Yeah.
With-
It'll be. It's like
Cheer 'em on.
what is it? Is it the ending of Rosemary's Baby? That's just like the upshot
Yeah.
with everybody looking over the crib. You know.
Yeah, it's gonna be like the end of Midsummer, except it's gonna be one person on a makeshift toilet and everybody else, chanting or whatever, and we burn another person to death or whatever.
And the person shitting will probably look a lot like the end of Pearl, where there's just a rictus grin that is being held for extremely long amount of time.
It's similar to Midsummer. She kind of looks into the camera with a big grin, and she's like, and she says to the camera, "This has certainly been quite the Midsummer."
If this is the Midsummer, what about the late summer?
What about winter?
Yeah, like how's that gonna go? Fuck. In the Midsummer, you lost your like sister, and then also like went to a cult and had a bunch of sacrifice. Like that's a fucking wild Midsummer. That late summer, that early fall, that's gonna change your life.
Here's my third point about the bladder bus thing. What if somebody at that event has to take a shit? Do they like send somebody in to confirm that they're shitting and not pissing? Like, do they have somebody who watches and is just like, let me get a good look at what you're doing in that toilet bowl, and we'll make sure that you're not violating the rules of the bladder burst or whatever.
You remove the flusher, so only someone from the house is able to flush.
Yeah,
like you have to. So like everything can be visually inspected before it gets flushed.
Could you put a cork in your urethra?
I mean, I don't know what the urethra has to do with shitting, but
no, I just mean
if
for
that
the
would
bladder,
help you, then yeah,
the bladder bust.
Look,
bladder bust.
I can't tell you tactics. I've never participated in one of these things, so I don't know what kind of wild ass tactics people are having. I'm sure somebody tried to tie it off like a balloon at some point. Like it probably happened.
Yeah. So that happy Halloween, everybody.
Happy Halloween.
That is a fantastically disgusting way to get into this episode.
It's been a minute since we had that long of a run about something that gross at the beginning of the show.
It has been a minute. And I'll tell you something, I kind of miss the brown and blue humor.
Well, let's bring it back. Fuck it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's time to start getting fucking blue again, frankly. So, Niall.
Mm-hmm.
This week, I decided I wanted to get you, specifically bring to you, two unique, strange, and maybe a little creepy alien encounters from around the world. That's right. No bullshit from the United States tonight. Okay.
Fantastic. We're fuck America today. This episode will come out pretty close to Election Day, so this is fitting that we're all spending time out of America.
Yeah, this is death to America. First story that we've got here. It's the short story. It's kind of the lead into a much longer, weirder story. But the story itself is fucking weird enough.
Ooh,
and
a little amuse-bouche, a little small bite to get you to tickle the palate.
Yes, this is the palate tickler. First story comes out of France. Aliens in France.
Sacre bleu.
Which I don't know if that's right, Niall. Thank you. I don't know if we've actually had a UFO or alien story from France yet.
I mean, how many times have we referenced? I feel like if we had the episode title would probably have something to do with Kung Pao, so we can go back and look.
Maybe
because they're the aliens.
Oh, the
France,
aliens are
remember.
Yeah.
That's the big reveal
from Kung Pao Enter the Fist. Yeah,
they're from France. So
you know what we should do is we should have an episode that's just me saying the lines in the voices from that movie. Just that's the whole episode. I could do it all.
Look, you got to do that as a bonus. Like that that you can't you just can't just give that away.
Honest,
Kyle recreating Kung Pao.
I'll put that at the
that's bonus content.
$5 level. We can get people to donate at that level to hear me recreate that film because I think I could do it, and I won't call it a movie. Film
because it deserves more respect than that. Yeah.
So there's actually a pretty good French UFO scene. It turns out there's a lot more than I kind of expected. But my source for both of our stories tonight come from the United States. I do have to look. I needed English speaking stuff, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So the way to get that was to look to the United States UFO outfit known as the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, aka APRO. And they put out these bulletins that cover all the UFO shit from around the world. Honestly, fantastic. If you ever are looking for good UFO stuff online, one thing you can do is the Archives of the Unexplained, I believe it's called. Look into that. Check out their archives of the APRO bulletin. Super cool stuff. Check it out. And that's where I got them. So this one is from the July 1968 bulletin. So this story was originally actually published in a French periodical known as, and sorry to the French, but like I'm not gonna get this right. It's a French periodical known as Phénomènes Spatiaux, like Spatiaux, Spatiaux is how I assume that is pronounced. The article in the bulletin is titled "Occupants in France," from APRO. But the story is more commonly known as the Cossack aliens. Now, it's August 29th, 1967. It's 10:30 a.m. 13-year-old Francois Despluch and his younger sister, Anne-Marie, are tending to a herd of cows near the village of Cossack, accompanied by their dog, Medor. And...
I love just the little bit of the French accent that pops out in the middle of these phrases with you. It's fun. I'm enjoying it.
I don't know shit about French. Here's the thing. When I want to say a word that it comes from France or German, I want the accent to come with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like impossible for me to like try and say it with an American voice. You know,
do you ever do that thing where like where when you're singing along to someone who has an accent that's very like really bleeds into the song, you end up kind of following it?
Yes,
I do that a lot.
It actually pisses me off because I'm like, dude, you're singing along to this like Welsh band.
Mm-hmm.
This is not what your voice sounds like, but you're falling in lockstep, and you're not Welsh. And you can't pretend to be, and you would never want to be, but here you are, you know.
We're really coming after places today. That's fun.
I guess so.
I don't know why do you not want to be Welsh? They seem cool.
Yeah, I guess it's slightly better than being like British or whatever.
Yeah, fuck the Brits.
So the story goes that the two children were watching the cows as they were about to jump over a low wall. The cows, not the children. The cows are getting ready to take a little leap. So Francois climbed up a pile of rocks, and as he did, he saw a strange sight over the hedge approximately 150 feet from where he stood. And there, he saw what he initially believed were a group of 4 children. There was something odd about them. Their bodies, where they would have a face, where they would have clothes, every part of them is just black, and it has a sort of silky texture.
Huh. Okay.
So these quote-unquote children had no discernible features in their faces, and near them, there was a large sphere that was shining so brightly it was difficult for Francois and Anne-Marie to look at. And I do believe that this thing is hovering at this moment. One of the 4 creatures appeared to be bent over and was fussing with something on the ground, while another held an object that, quote, reflected the light like a mirror, and he waved his hands and seemed to be making signs to his companions. Which, I can't remember which story this was, but the one creature fussing over something on the ground and the other one doing hand signs, like throwing gang signs at his other members, that happened in another story that we like recently discussed. I want to say it's the guy who went up in the tree.
Yeah, in the tree.
Whose name is escaping me at this moment. This is only a couple episodes ago. And I think that something similar happened there. And I think it's also somewhat similar in the timeline, maybe. Like, I think he was 60. He might have been early 70s. Anyways.
So is there a type of protective suit that looks like black silk children?
I don't know, but like it's like I just always find it funny when there are certain details that come back
Mhm.
among cases within like a certain time in the history. I don't know if it actually means anything, but like my brain is like must have find meaning.
Yeah,
Uh,
you gotta figure out where that came from. Like, what or do they have a common cultural thing
right.
they're referencing that kind of
Yes.
influenced it, or did one hear about the other? Like, is there something like that that connects them in that
Yeah.
way? I get the same thoughts.
It happens every time I read these stories. So yeah, these little silky black creatures are fucking buzzing around the base of this orb, pondering their orb, and they describe the sphere that's hovering is shining so brightly that Francois and Anne Marie couldn't like keep direct eye contact like in its direction.
Mhm.
Uh, and Francois still thought that maybe these were other children, so he called out to them saying, "Are you coming to play with us?" Uh, Up until this point, the creatures hadn't paid any attention to the two children, but when Francois called out, they seemed to realize they were being watched. And this is where we get a description that I believe is coming from the children, and then all of the details from this case are the children being interviewed by French investigators who are working for another like UFO magazine type thing in the
Okay.
area. And here's what they say they saw. Quote, "The first figure flew up or hovered vertically and dived headfirst into the top of the sphere. The second followed him in the same manner, and the third one, after standing up, did the same," which the one that's standing up is the one that's been fussing on the ground. Uh,
Okay.
The fourth figure rose up off the ground, came down again, appeared to pick up something. Then he took off again and caught up with the sphere, which during this time had begun to rise, describing small circles, and had reached a height of about 15 meters or 50 feet. The fourth little figure then disappeared into the sphere in the same manner as the other three. As the sphere rose from the ground, a low, fairly sharp hissing noise was heard, mingled with a noise like a breeze blowing, which neither of the children felt. So when these things realize that there's these two kids watching them, they like fly into the top of their UFO. They float in the air. These little tiny black creatures fly into the orb, and then the orb begins to ascend.
Hmm.
Now, the object then went around a few more circles as it rose into the air, and as it did so, the light enveloping it also rose in intensity, and then it suddenly shoots off at a high speed in a northwesterly direction. And both of the kids immediately notice the smell of sulfur, and they pick up that the cows in the nearby field have begun to, quote, bellow and become uneasy. And their dog, Medor, was also going apeshit and tried to, like, take off a couple times as if it was going to follow the object. Luckily, nothing happened to the dog. Although, I would point out, since this is in 1968, the dog is definitely dead.
Yeah, but probably maybe of natural causes.
Yeah, probably. I mean, they don't say anything like weeks after the event, the dog was murdered in a
There's
dog killing situation, or
there's not one of those like end of an 80s movie things where it like freeze frames on a character and tells you where they went after the movie,
no.
you know?
Yeah,
Okay.
Medor lived a long life, graduated from law school, got his degree, passed the bar, and was tragically killed at the end of his life. He was 89 in dog years, but he was murdered. So
They let him live a long life though, you know?
yeah. So in the wake of the strange happening, the children decided to wrangle the cows and take them in half an hour earlier than usual due to all of these animals being perturbed. Now, here's where we get the admittedly kind of sparse details about the creatures. But it's still interesting. So they were about 3.5 to 4 feet tall based on the descriptions, but they weren't all the same height, which is interesting because I feel like there's a lot of uniformity in alien encounters, especially things that are like even vaguely humanoid. It's like they're all 4 feet tall, you know? But so they were between 3.5 and 4 feet tall, but varied in height a little bit. The first and the second, that that are like noted in sketches in the APRO bulletin. So like the first one to go back into the ship and the second one back into the ship, they're the smallest one. And the largest one was the last one that went into the ship. No idea if this detail means anything whatsoever, but it is sort of an outlier thing for an alien encounter.
Yeah. It's like one of those elementary school things where the teacher lines you up in height order,
yes,
like on certain, like to keep things fresh.
Yeah,
so
to
that it's
humble
not always
you.
the same person in the front. You like,
yeah,
one day it's by first name, one day it's by height, one day it's by last name, so that not everyone's always in the front or the back.
exactly.
Yeah.
But
All
really
right.
putting you on blast if you're like a shorty.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, hey, short kings lead the way. You know.
That's true. I do. So the children were unable to tell if the black color of these creatures was their skin or if they had a suit on. They can't tell. Again, another common theme, 60s, 70s encounters with aliens. Hard to tell if it's skin or if it's a suit. But what's notable is that there was no like visible like border between what would possibly be skin versus garment. There was no contrast nor anything showing separation between the two. It was all uniform, right? So impossible to say. And their heads were like bare. They didn't seem to have hair or hats or anything. The arms were long and slender, and they didn't have hands. They almost actually, it's going to be similar to the other encounter we're talking about, but they almost like have little tiny. I wouldn't call them tentacles necessarily, but they kind of end in nubs. Is the way it gets described. Now they had short and thin legs, and the feet, which they notably describe the fourth biggest one as having the feet. He had like webbed feet, which. So here, let me just read what it says here. It says, although the head appeared to be normal in size relative to the body, the skull was pointed and the chin was very marked. The nose was also pointing, and this is the pointed nose is a detail that was given by the younger sister, Anne Marie. But both of the children agreed that the little creatures had beards. It was situated on each side of the head with a little tuft under the chin. No eyes or mouth were evident, and neither was there any indication of any apparatus which enabled the creatures to fly. So I find it weird that I don't quite get this because they talk about uniform, lack of detail, but then they start giving out details like they have beards, webbed feet. Do they mean that there were webs in between their toes? I don't really know. Do they mean that they had like webbed feet, like a how like a duck? Like I don't really know exactly what that means. Because there's like extra details at the end of the story, but like not enough detail to get a really good picture. But then they have little beard tufts. Super fucking weird. No clue what to do with any of that.
Yeah, that's different. I don't.
Yeah.
Webbed feet is not something we've come across before, I don't think.
No, I not like this at least. So the story of the Cossack aliens was investigated by Joel Mesnard and Claude Pavey for the aforementioned periodical that Phenomena Spatiaux. There are also a few well-drawn images based on the story that I mentioned, and one of them includes a topographical view of the field where all of this went, where the cows were supposedly.
Oh, I love that shit.
It's great.
Where someone has like an aerial shot of the field all of it took place in with big circles. Like, here's where this happened. And does it do anything for me? Not really, but it's cool to see.
No, I do love, and I'm a visual learner. So like picturing it in my head, it does kind of help me with distances a little bit. But it's I do love it. I mean, it's just one of those things where like they're going to make the topographical view and all this. This is pretty common like UFO nerd stuff to like get as many details crammed into there as you possibly can, even though like all those details don't actually really help to determine the truth of anything here. It's you're left with more questions than answers the more details you have, really.
Yeah.
So, uh, so yeah, there's these nice images of how this all went down, and then there's illustrations of the beings. The trajectory of their leap back into the craft is one of the things that they sort of note down, and then the order that they jumped into the craft. And the last little thing here is that the investigators make note that there were minute differences in the telling of the story between the two children. Unfortunately, we don't get an explanation about what those differences were. Maybe in the original French article you do, but I don't have that.
Mhm.
But it's noted that the investigators didn't consider the small differences in the stories as being noticeable enough to be like truly, or notable enough to be truly contradictory. And they even have a thing that I thought was incredible where they say the investigators asked questions of the kids that were designed to like intentionally confuse the children into like forcing them to like contradict their stories, basically, to like see if they're like, to kind of tease out whether or not they're telling the truth, to get them to contradict themselves.
They were using like police interrogation tactics to try to like break these children.
I guess, I don't know. So, but apparently it didn't work because the kids stuck to their stories. Like they're like I said, there's these tiny differences. Don't know what they are specifically, but the kids nonetheless like maintained the core details of the story. Now there was a 2007 Washington Post article on the French UFO files this is all a part of like, so APRO covered it, but like in 2007, France's National Center for Space Studies put out every document that they had on UFOs, and just let it out into the public. So here we have an article from the Washington Post back when that happened, where they talk about this case, and we get a couple more details of the aftermath of the sighting that aren't in the APRO bulletin. And it says this, quote, "The alleged extraterrestrial sighting described by the French government as one of the most astonishing observed in France is among 1,600 UFO case files spanning the last half century that the country's space agency opened to the public for the first time." And then they describe the case as I just described it, but then we get this little extra tidbit at the end. "The children raced home in tears, and their father summoned the local police, who noted the sulfur odor and the dried grass at the reported place where the sphere took off," the report continued. "Investigators said they were impressed by the uniformity of detail provided by the children and other witnesses. No rational explanation has been given to date of this exceptional meeting," the investigation concluded. So that's presumably from the French. They're quoting some stuff from the French article, I think. So that is the Cossack alien encounter. Cossack? Well, Cussac.
Oh, Cossack. Okay. Fair enough.
And it's French. So I don't know. Don't know French, but I thought that was such a weird, unique story. It was worth including.
Yeah. Like, we're always on the lookout for these, like, different kind of types of physical representations of aliens that aren't just like, oh, it was a Greys, or oh, it was Nordics, or oh, it was like. So these one-offs are always interesting to find because it feels like they feel more interesting because it doesn't feel like you're reading the same story over and over again.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the 60s and 70s are the best times for those kinds of stories. They're fantastic. So, thought that story was great. I have one more for you that is even so much weirder. It is a weird goddamn story, and I love it. So the next story comes from Brazil, in the neighborhood of Paciencia, in the western area of Rio de Janeiro. So this is, like I said, a strange, unique story about entities that have come to be referred to as the Paciencia abductors. It's September 15th, 1977, and Antonio Larrubia, who was a 33-year-old bus driver, has an out-of-this-world encounter. This story was investigated by field investigator Irene Granchi, who collected newspaper stories on the incident. I do believe she interviewed the witness, and she wrote up a report, and then she passed all this along, translated into English to APRO. So one of those really beautiful collaborations that got us a lot more information than we would normally get.
Hell yeah.
Most places online you'll find they'll refer to this as the Palencia, Jesus, no, Paciencia abductors, but APRO's report calls it the Brazilian CE4 case.
CE4, what does
I
that stand for?
actually don't know what CE4 means here in this context. Having read the story, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I was actually trying to hunt down a copy of whatever bulletin this was posted in, but I just kind of got the text that was like copied from the actual bulletin, because I sort of wonder if maybe there's like extra context. I don't know what CE4 is. I would like to know.
Okay.
No, I'm fucking stupid. I know what CE4 is. We know what CE4 is. Close Encounter.
Oh shit. Okay.
My
so
brain.
Okay. Yeah.
Of course, I know what a fucking CE4 is. Don't
Close
email
Encounter,
us. So Antonio LaRubia, he gets up regularly at 2 a.m. due to his job. He gets up, washes his face, brushes his teeth, and then he leaves around 2:15 a.m., 2:20 a.m. So when all of this goes down, he believes that he left around 2:20 a.m. That's somewhere around there.
Okay.
He notes that it's sometime around there because 2:20 a.m. is when his watch stops.
Okay, so we have electrical disturbances. Gotcha.
We have missing time and electrical disturbances. So there's a large field near his home that he walks to, and he's approaching it, gets near the corner of it, and then he stops before he stops short of it, because in this field he realizes there is this thing is fucking huge. He sees an object approximately 235 feet across. That's his estimation, because he, I guess, knows that the field that he's standing before is 235 feet across, and the bulk of whatever this thing was extended beyond the boundaries of the field. So it's fucking huge.
Yeah, that's a big boy. All right.
Now, initially, he describes this thing as having a dull leaden color, so I'm sort of picturing like a gray metallic thing.
Sure.
He says it's sort of shaped like a hat. And his initial assumption is that it was resting on the ground. Now, this is one of those little details that they don't know for sure. But there's a possibility it wasn't resting on the ground and was hovering. It was so large he didn't, see like landing appendages or anything.
Mm-hmm.
He just assumed. But when investigators came back later, they found no burned grass. They found no impressions in the ground. Nothing to indicate that a craft landed there.
So they think that it didn't actually touch ground effectively.
Yeah, it's the guess that it's hovering if he saw a giant 235-foot long object. Now, apparently, LaRubia didn't believe in UFOs prior to this encounter, but as he came up on this object, he began to believe. And he works for a thing called the Oriental Bus Company, and he has to ride a bus to go to the terminal where he's going to start work at the bus company. And so he comes on this thing, thinks for a second that maybe it's the bus that he needs to ride to get. It's also late. It's 2 a.m, so it's dark.
Right.
Thinks it's the bus that he needs to ride, and then the sudden shock of that's not the bus eventually becomes, is this a UFO?
Huh. So I get, that's one of those things that I can kind of see. It's late, it's dark. You see a thing that's gray and everything. But can you really a 235-foot long thing mistake that for a bus for any actual length of time?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I get what you're saying, but I also kind of get what they're saying in this story of in the haze of the early morning after you just woke up and you have to go to work and it's pitch black outside. I kind of get it, but also when you think about the fact that our perception of things is sometimes has to come into uniformity as we approach it, it's like I just imagine that he's like a distance from it, and then there's a shocking moment where that uniformity just like appears before him, and it's like, oh
Yeah.
fuck, that's not the bus, that's what I'm imagining. But I can
All right.
also see what you're saying. It is weird.
It's just like it's one of those things that like sound the first time I hear it, my brain goes okay, and then it thinks about it, and I think about it, and it's like I don't know about that, and now like I really go back and forth on does that make any fucking sense whatsoever?
Yeah.
So I'll leave with it. I'll
Yeah.
leave it.
So when the shock kind of hits him, LaRubia is like, I'm gonna run for it. But as soon as he starts to think that, he is now like unable to run. They don't use this word, but it sounds like he becomes paralyzed. And he's standing by a light, like an electric light pole,
Mhm.
and it becomes illuminated by brilliant blue light. And when that happens, he sees 3 quote unquote robots standing near him. They're about, by his description, 4 feet tall, but they have antennae, which are kind of coming out the center, Bender style, a la Futurama.
Okay. Yeah.
Out of their heads. And the antenna is long enough to make these 4 foot tall beings taller than LaRubia, who's about 5 feet 5 inches. At least by his estimation, that's what it looks like to him.
Okay, so it makes it we're dealing with kind of I don't know why this is where my brain goes. Do you know the whole thing about like tall buildings putting really tall antennas on top to like make themselves taller and be able to beat more buildings and how tall they are?
No, but that makes some sense, I guess.
Yeah.
In a weird way.
It just thinking about that. Well, these things were taller than him because they're really big antennas. It just made me think of buildings that are compensating for something.
Sure, of course. It's a dick measuring contest, is what you're saying. I
Yeah.
understand. I can read
Antenna,
now.
I
I
mean,
can
much
read
like
between
much
the
like
lines.
Bender, much like Bender, the antenna is the dick. There is that whole
That's
episode where it gets
true.
cut off, and
I
it's
forgot
a whole
about
thing.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't need. Not sure I would need to rewatch that one nowadays.
Well,
There are certain things where it's like, is that going to be like super transphobic if I go back and rewatch that?
Yeah,
Very possibly.
Not comedy ages like dirt. Unfortunately. Yeah, it's well, nobody cuts anybody's antenna off here, but the antennas are
Mhm.
weird. And let me just actually give you the straight up description that I got from the report. Quote,
Okay.
the heads of the creatures were shaped like American footballs, with a band extending across the middle horizontally, which looked like a row of small mirrors of a blue shade, one a little darker than the others. What I'm kind of picturing, just not the same colors, is like Black Manta.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
See,
Like,
I kind of got distracted because you very like pretty soon you said the phrase American football band
that's
like
true.
immediately, and
Yeah.
my brain just literally started playing Never Meant
Yeah.
because I'm poisoned.
No, I get it.
So but I'm back with you. Okay, so we got kind of like the like bulbous helmet with the black
Yeah.
visor kind of
But it's like a
band across
blue
it, sure.
color. It's like blue and
Yeah.
metallic. And like the visor thing. You know what I actually initially thought when I read the story is I thought of the like intergalactic visitor from Venture Brothers who's like at the wedding, like taking photos and recording things.
Oh my god!
And he leans up to everybody and goes, "Ignore me." That's what I that's what I initially thought of.
I haven't thought about that guy in a minute.
Yeah.
That's a really Venture Brothers is fucking.
It's a
funny.
good show. So yeah, fucking weird. It goes on to say, the bodies, Antonio said, were stocky. The trunk was broader than his own, and they note here he's muscular but of a slender build. They had appendages for arms, which he compared to elephants' trunks, and which narrowed down to pointed tips resembling one finger. Their bodies were made of a rough substance resembling scales. So as I was reading this, I then like started to look up images of these things as well.
Mhm.
What they actually look like, the closest resemblance for me. Did you ever play Earthbound?
Not extensively. I have played the like opening town sequence a couple times on emulators and shit.
Okay. I also played through it legally on my copy, which I ripped to my computer and then played through.
Oh
on
right, yeah,
emuulator,
yeah, yeah.
So.
I got the really
Um,
expensive copy of Earthbound that everyone has.
Yeah. No, I played it forever ago. I think in college, but these guys look a lot like Starman, who's like the silver robot with like the sort of trunk arms that like look like tentacles, and he's like kind of got him
Oh
like
yeah, yeah. Okay.
his hands on his hips. They're very similar to him, actually. I like that character's
Mhm.
design, and they look like Starman. So Google Starman from Earthbound if you don't know what I'm
And
talking
then
about.
go read
Um,
Is it James Robinson that did the Starman Sins of the Father series? That with the
oh, I don't know.
that that stuff's good. Go read that. I think it's a Vertigo book.
Yeah,
It's good shit.
check it out. So they have these weird arms that are like trunks with like narrowed down tips as appendages, down to like one single finger, and their bodies are made of a rough substance resembling scales. Now, what I think is notable about the scales thing is they ask Antonio, like, well, if they look like scales, is it possible it's wearing some sort of armor? And he says no, because the way that they moved freely didn't sort of implied that they were not impeded by armor that they were wearing.
So basically, what he should be
Um,
saying is that they're not wearing like heavy armor, because like it
sure,
could be some
they could have
type
been
of
wearing light
chainmail
armor.
thing that doesn't encumber him. You know,
They might not be proficient in medium or heavy armor. That is a good point, Niall. Thank you.
I'm just
It
here
could be
to poke holes in 50-year-old UFO encounters. You
sure.
know,
No, and you should, and you should do it you should do it often. I don't know what that means.
I don't know.
So there, he looks at their legs
Okay.
now, and it turns out it's actually singular. They have one leg, and he thinks at first that they're sitting on stools, but what they're actually doing is they basically have a single leg that ends on a sort of like saucer shaped stump. And so, but they look, he describes them specifically as like they look like they are sitting on like stools. At one point, he confuses them for like, he doesn't confuse them, but it reminds him of children in a school classroom because of the stools that they're sitting on, or it looks like they're sitting on. So, actually, his actual comparison is it says that the leg and platform, he compares it to the stools utilized on ships. So I think he means like seafaring.
Yeah, so like
ships.
the more of like the single metal post with the sure. Okay.
Yeah.
It really feels like, have you seen, this is just one of those things that I don't know when this was invented, but they have those things that's like you wear it as like a fanny pack almost, and then it unfurls like a post that goes, and you like lean against it when you're in line. You ever seen that shit?
No, I've never
It's
seen
like a
that.
seat that you can kind of just like wear, and it can be collapsible so it goes away, and you can like, if you're waiting in line, it's like a mobility aid thing for like if you're having to stand for a long period of time, you can
Oh,
like take the
okay.
weight off. Um
Okay. No, I've never seen that. Oh, but what you're saying is you could cosplay as one
yeah,
of these guys
for
pretty
sure.
readily. Yeah, and he also says that these things are a dull shade of aluminum.
All right.
So, one of these robots is standing right in front of him, and then there's one beside him and another behind him. So they've kind of circled around him almost. And this blue light comes on, and when the blue light comes on, that's when he like truly becomes paralyzed. He can't move, and he tries to like flail, but realizes that it feels to him like he's imprisoned in a human-sized like mason jar, like a glass jar is what it feels like.
Interesting.
And other than that sensation of being trapped in this jar, he's pretty much normal. He just feels like he's like anxious and nervous about what's going on. And he watches these creatures sort of float along. Now, again, unlike the other story, they're all the same height. But one of them, he says, was holding something that looked kind of like a syringe. So The one holding the syringe raises its like tentacled
Mhm.
arm and points the syringe at Larubia, and he begins to move without like realizing it. He feels himself moving without his actual like own input towards the ship.
Okay.
And apparently he doesn't like, the way they describe it in the report is like he doesn't remember how he got onto the ship, but he remembers moving towards it and it not really him not being in control. And as he came close to the ship, he feels this tremor, and then he suddenly finds himself in this corridor that is made of the sort of leaden aluminum substance that he's seen before. And then past that corridor, there's a wall. Two of the robots that are around him go one way down the hall, and then the other robot goes down the other way down the hall. And there's this weird thing where like he's looking down this hallway that they're taking him into, and he can see the field that they took him from, that he was abducted from. And he assumes that the sort of like shell of this UFO is transparent, and that it was now lifting up off the ground. So he now can sort of feel it like starting to move in the air. And as he's looking out, another bright blue light shines again, and then he finds himself in a large circular room. And he sees that this blue light is coming from the ceiling, but it's a lighter hue than the other blue light that he saw. And it sort of like almost blends in with the aluminum color of the walls, is the way he describes it.
Okay.
And now he sees a dozen of these like sort of robotic entities on one side and another dozen on the other side of this room. And this is where he has this sort of confusion of like, it looked like children in a classroom because of their legs looked like seats that they were sitting on. And so he's been sort of like struggling and trying to escape and trying to move his body, but he can't get out. He can't really move. And then he finally manages to shout out to the creatures, "What do you want? Who are you?" And this is one of the details that like kind of weirds me the fuck out. When he yells, all of the creatures that he can see just suddenly fall to the floor. And he believes that his voice somehow caused that to happen. And the light then comes on stronger, almost blinding him. What kind of is so freaky about that detail to me is it feels very dreamlike.
Yeah.
Where like you have a thing that you do in your dream that something in your dream reacts suddenly to. Like, like I don't know. It's such a weird little detail.
Yeah, look, there you could go the easy direction and say he awakened his inner Black Bolt. He's a little bit Blackagar Boltagon. But I think in general it's more like I always wonder. Okay, so you know how like there's that movie The Happening, the M. Night Shyamalan movie, where like it turns out like oxygen is the thing, but like I feel like there have to be these certain things that alien races are going to be just weak to because they weren't like humans evolved one way and a bunch of other things evolved other ways. So it would make sense for some alien race to be like fucked up by the human vocal cords and the vocal range, you know, like those frequencies just don't work for them in that way. So maybe hey, so maybe these guys are that's why we haven't seen more of them, is because they realized coming to Earth is like true pain for them if they hear us talk.
Yeah, that's true. There's another weird little noise related detail here, sound related detail, because he can hear at this point he can't hear his own breathing, but he hears a breathing like sound coming from the entities, which he thinks is strange because they're all robotic. Right. So he hears them breathing.
They're fans.
And he starts shouting, and all of them then raise their appendages, and they hold their like tentacled appendages up to the tips of their antenna. And they like it's such a fucking weird, because now suddenly he says, well, up until this point, that antenna had been spinning on their heads so fast that he couldn't tell exactly what the shape was. But then these robot creatures all reach up and grab their own antennas. And when they hold them, he makes out the shape and he says that it looks like a tablespoon or a teaspoon.
Okay.
So very strange. He notes that there's the only other like thing in this room is some sort of object that he describes as looking like a piano. It's a box-shaped object. It's about 6 inches in width, and it was standing on these two like supporting like pole beam things, and they kind of came up to about chest height for Antonio. And on each side of the outside of this box, there were antennae that were sticking up from it. And then to one side of this box, there's like piano keys, almost is what it looks like to him. There was also, I guess, on the object something that looked like a tin can, and these robot beings inserted some sort of object that they would take from their belts into the tin can. And I'll just read what it says here. Quote, "At this juncture, Antonio explained that the beings wore belts which hung by hooks, apparatuses which resembled syringes, which they inserted into the box. Each time this was done, an image appeared on the wall of the UFO in color showing a different scene." And this is where we go full insano mode.
Yeah, because that's like so they have like liquid syringe, like hologram technology. Like that's a weird one. Okay.
It's so fucking weird. So they start showing him images that are being projected from this box that they're putting syringes into. And here's what he remembered. What's also super weird, and we'll get to this in a moment, but like he has this initial set of things that he remembers being shown, but then like he also, as he describes the story to the investigator, he starts remembering more images that were shown.
Oh, so we don't even go through hypnotic regression or anything. He just remembers more stuff.
I don't know if he underwent hypnotic regression or not. But like as he's recounting the story, he recalls more, is the way it sort of reads. So the first thing they show him is an image of himself, La Rubia, lying on what he thinks is an invisible table, and he's nude. And his arms are swinging about, his legs are laying straight, and two of these robot beings are examining him with like little bluish lights. And they're kind of running them over his chest and head. And he says that everything in the image looked blue, like the light going over his head and everything, it would make his hair look blue and everything. And that's what he sees in this first picture. So he watches this, and then another creature comes up to this like console and then injects it again with another object. And he sees a new scene. And the next scene, he again sees himself, but he's naked, and he's still naked, but he's standing. And then next they show himself dressed, carrying a shopping bag, and his teeth are like clattering, and he looks very nervous, but no sound came from him. And one of his arms is like swinging around. Then they show him a picture of a horse and cart that was being drawn over a dirt road. And he says that he does not recognize the location, but there seemed to be a man on the cart and a peasant who was wearing a straw hat, barefooted, and had a torn shirt. And then they show him a picture of a ball of light that's orange, and Antonio is standing next to the ball of light. And then the next image is a ball of light again, with him standing next to it, but this time the ball of light is blue, and one of the robot beings is also standing next to it. And then they note here that the next one's difficult to describe, so they just used the Mrs. Granchi, the investigator's exact words that she said to them. So she said, quote, "A dog was shown trying to get at one of those beings. Also shown in the picture, the dog was big and slobbering at the mouth, trying hard to get at the being, unable to reach it, and looked very angry. Then the dog gave out 4 or 5 barks. At this point, the being started to melt from top to bottom like porridge." Then he sees a factory, which is apparently a factory that's operated by whatever these robotic beings are, and it seems to be where these UFO crafts are manufactured.
Okay.
Uh, this is a weird description, but apparently the scene as he sees it is white and stretched out, so he can't see like the peripherals
Uh-huh.
of it, basically, like the end of it. But he sees rows of UFOs. Then and there were like three. The ones on the like left side are ones that are like in the process of being built, and then the ones on the right side were the ones that were like almost ready, almost complete. And he says that in this image there are millions of the robotic beings walking around, but he makes note that none of them seem to be carrying tools. Then he sees an image of a train that he describes as being like the Japanese trains that they currently used in Brazil, but older. Quote, something the worse for wear, windowless, entering a tunnel whereupon it was lost from view. And then finally, they showed quote, they showed an avenue which Mrs. Granchi compared with Avenida Presidente Vargas, one of the busiest thoroughfares in Rio de Janeiro, jammed with cars. So this is where the investigators, like, he says his list of images that they show him ends
Mhm.
here, but he would later like describe more scenes that were shown to him here. And the other one that he describes to her is he sees a scene where he is dressed and he's vomiting and no joke shitting his own pants. Uh,
I guess I can see why you would leave that one out of the initial telling in some ways, because it's like that's not the one that I would want to put out into the world. But it is weird
yeah.
to add that one later, you know?
Well, it seems to maybe be connected to what kind of happens to him. So he then describes how the beings, after like they show him all this stuff, they then extract blood from him, and the way they do this is extremely fucking weird. So one of the robots comes up, takes one of the syringes from its belt with its like tentacle appendage, and then passes it over to its own left appendage, and it starts to rotate, I think, the syringe. And Antonio can no longer like track the syringe as it rotates because it's so fast. And then suddenly it's pointed at him, and without him knowing it, La Rubia like finds his arm, his right arm is like suddenly lifted
Okay.
up. Totally against his will. And the syringe is stuck into the middle of finger of his right hand. And he describes the syringe filling with his blood until it nearly overflows. And it's weird. He says he knows that it's his blood because everything else in the place was blue or white or metallic, and there was no contrasting color, and this red, deep, dark blood was the only color that he saw in that place.
I mean, that makes sense. Like the blood, I do like that these guys have an aesthetic and they stick to it. They keep in that same kind of blues and grays. So it allows for the human stuff to really pop and feel foreign, which is good for
That's
aliens.
true.
You know, that's good design.
Yeah. It says here also, quote, so he never feels the prick, and he never feels like there's no mark from where they extracted blood, and he doesn't feel the blood leaving his body. And then it says, quote, then the being who had taken the blood pointed at a picture on the wall and drew 3 circles, presumably with Antonio's blood, and then dissected them with an L-shaped mark.
Interesting.
So they are drawing with his blood and then putting a mark on it. It's very strange. No clue what's going on there. Now, the investigator, Mrs. Granchi, sort of suggests that maybe this blood drawing experience came before or somewhere in between La Rubia being shown all those images. Based off of just, I guess, the way this guy's describing stuff. And then La Rubia describes that after this like street scene where he sees like the really busy street, he feels himself thrown overboard and fallen into a street that was opposite the Paciencia station.
Okay.
So he's been ejected from the UFO, maybe. And when he lands, one of the robots is standing there with him, and all of his belongings are returned to him, including, they note, his bag, which had not been taken onto the craft. So they return him exactly to what he was, even like they abduct him, leave some of his ship behind, then return it to him the way he was when they picked him up. Basically.
Okay, so he gets all of his stuff, even the stuff that was supposedly left behind when they took him. Okay.
Yeah. So he looks at his watch now and realizes it's 2:20 a.m. According to his watch. And he watches as what he describes as being the bottom of a large, dark, smooth balloon lifting up into the air. And it was huge, but it went up into the air until it shrank so small he could no longer see it. Weird little note here. The investigator's like, were there any other witnesses to all of this shit that happened? And LaRubia's like, yeah, there was, but the witness is a man who is a known drunk, and so he's not reliable.
So we just didn't interview him at all?
I have no information on who this is.
Okay.
He just straight up says the other guy that saw it had been telling people about a UFO he'd seen that morning. He's the only other witness to this, but he's a drunk, so I don't want to submit him.
Okay.
I guess. I don't know. It is a very strange little detail. So when he gets to the station, he actually asks the time, and while his watch says 2:20, it's actually 2:50 a.m.
Okay.
And he resets his watch to that time. He catches a bus at 3:10, arrives to work, but he is super sick all day. He's aching all over. He drove his bus, but he would kind of almost black out a few times by working throughout the day. So he works all day, then he works again on Friday, and then he comes home that night and goes to bed. And this is, in his telling of the story, this is when he again remembers another image that he was shown that he had forgotten. And in this image, he sees himself with smoke coming out of his back, and he feels pain and heat. And now that he was home, he had started to feel, in reality, pain and heat on his body. And he sort of connects the pain and the heat that he's feeling with this image that was shown to him. And he's guessing that the images that were shown to him on the UFO were all things that were depicting what was going to happen to him, stuff that he was now experiencing, except for his shit pants, for whatever
Yeah, that
reason.
one, they just were making fun of him, I guess. I don't know.
I don't know.
A little rib.
I guess. Well, it's funny because he doesn't tell his wife, but they make note. The researcher's like, yeah, apparently on Friday night he had diarrhea. Nothing about it being in his pants, but he has diarrhea. And then he misses work on Saturday just because he's too sick. He feels too shitty. And then misses it again on Sunday. Can't go to work Sunday. He's fucked up. And on Sunday, that's when he starts feeling this burning. And it spreads throughout his entire body and causes him terrible pain. And then Monday morning, he goes back to work at the bus company and says, hey, I have to quit. I'm fucked.
Yeah. Okay.
And then he starts having difficulty breathing. He's burning and he's itching. He even has a fellow coworker hose him down with water. And apparently this coworker told him he looked, quote, as green as grass. And so he tells the investigator that when he walked, he had this empty feeling, quote, as though he was walking on a cloud, and that this feeling persisted as late as 33 days after the incident.
Is this lining up with a lot of these things when people get abducted? It ends up lining up with radiation stuff. Is this?
I don't know. I mean,
I don't think this quite lines up.
Burning,
with
he'd be vomiting.
Yeah.
You know, I guess it could. I guess a lighter. I don't know if a lighter radiation sickness results in just diarrhea, but I've always read like I think burning over the body makes sense, but like I've always read like
Right.
vomiting as being a key
Okay.
thing. Which like he's sick, so like I think he may have been vomiting, maybe. So it's entirely possible that there's some crossover here with the radiation sickness thing. Um, so he he ends up like visiting with a nurse, and they're like talking about giving him a tranquilizer, but he's like, I don't want to do that because I think that's gonna make this worse. Uh, and I guess the people working at the clinic that he goes to thought that he was crazy, and so they constrain him, and he's taken to the hospital. And there they're like, this guy's insane because he's babbling about UFOs. Uh, he had also been, I guess, seen by the psychologist for the like the bus company has a psychologist
That's
named Dr. Nellie Carbonell.
like, I mean, that's taking care of your workers.
But she decides he's psychologically normal. So not sure what happened there. And they also at the hospital are like, you're raving about UFOs and we think you're insane, but we've inspected you and you're totally fine. And he's like, why am I fucked up then? Like, what's going on? And so this sort of escalation is like what ends up leading to researchers finding out about it. He gets like visited by a doctor for his like workers employer relief thing, and they hear about the UFO, and then they call doctors, and people start going, okay, well, we need to study this. And the only thing that they seem to actually like register as being like legitimate is he has a fever of 103 degrees.
Yeah, that's pretty legitimate. Okay.
Yeah. So he's sick for a while, and he has like these shitty feelings for, like I said, like over a month. But it doesn't sound like they find out what happened here. He seems to believe it was UFOs and some sort of alien. But we have a little quote from the original investigator, Mrs. Granchi, at the end here, and she says this: "The most puzzling new facts in this case are the showing of the pictures, not in themselves as such, but what did the beings wish to communicate? This is the task for many specialized scientists to try and unravel. What message did they wish to convey? The simplest seems that, as we harm them, they can harm us. That there are many of them as there are many of us. That they can tell our future, but we cannot tell theirs. That they can isolate people in invisible bell jars, and so on. Shall we have time to reflect on this before they come over in larger hordes?"
Okay.
It's a good point. And so that, Niall, is the story of the Paciencia abductors.
Interesting. So we got that.
That's what I got.
I like these ones where it's a little more mechanical man-esque. I like the aliens that are kind of robots. I don't know if that's like they're because that feels like it's a lot of a specific era. I'm curious. Like, is it? Did everyone just see The Day the Earth Stood Still and is like aliens are robots now?
It feels very like pulp sci-fi, metal men from Mars. You know, it definitely feels like that. I think that stuff like starts to like is at its height in like the 60s, and then it probably in the 50s too, and then the 70s you get these weird cases as well. But by the 80s you don't get as many weird stories, so it's like maybe it's sort of fading from cultural consciousness. I don't know. It's a good point. Like the science fiction and the Fordiana have all kind of blended together at this point. So I'm curious. Yeah, it's a weird story. Don't know what's true, but I'm fascinated about it. It's really, really interesting.
Fantastic.
So those are my two globe-trotting alien stories for you today, Niall.
We went to France and we went to Brazil. Both good.
Yeah.
All right.
Both places I've never gotten to go in real life, but would like to someday.
I've been to one of them.
Okay, it was France, not
I've been
Brazil.
I've been
I had to
France.
think for a second. I knew that. So I had to go into my Nile facts database real quick and retrieve that one. Are you ready for a big question?
Oh, I'm so ready, Kyle.
All right. If you had to be abducted by an alien who looked like a video game character, what video game character would you want them to look like, and that would ease your abduction experience?
Man, I feel like going for something human would probably be the cop out here, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So,
Do you want to know mine? Because I know mine
Yeah, go
right off
ahead.
the bat. Shadow the Hedgehog.
perfect
And I'll tell you
organism.
why. Sure, exactly. So he was developed to be the world's perfect hedgehog with the ultimate power, right? So number one, if I'm able to sort of like make allies with this abductor
Mhm.
who is Shadow the Hedgehog in this scenario, I have the most powerful hedgehog in the galaxy on my side. Second, he's kind of already dealt with like humans in outer space. So I feel like he would have sort of the whole thing with Maria in Sonic Adventure 2,
Mhm.
she dies in a big, it's like they're in a satellite and Robotnik
Yeah,
blows her up with a nuke or whatever.
one
I don't
of the,
remember
one of the
exactly
great
how it goes.
tragedies of our time. Yes.
Yeah. So he's already dealt with like tragedy of human tragedy in outer space. I feel like he's so emotionally affected by that because he's a very emotional hedgehog.
Mhm.
He, would be like, "Oh, I have a human I've abducted into outer space, I should take care of this human." I think that would be very nurturing for me.
Okay.
And like we're both kind of like edgy guys, cool edgy guys who use guns. And so I think that like we would have a good relationship at the end of it. Like I obviously the shock of being abducted would be scary, but I feel like I would be like, "Oh no, me and Shadow the Hedgehog, we're not so different."
Yeah,
Me and him.
I think that's a good.
And that's kind of where it would go, I think. That's my guess. I don't
Yeah.
know. What do you think?
I was kind of going back and forth in my head all the time while you were talking, trying to figure out which one of these to go with. And I think honestly, I'm gonna go with my heart, uh,
Sure.
and say that I want to be abducted by Bomberman. Now
Of course. Okay.
See,
Yeah.
Bomberman has like a spaceship, especially if you're looking at like Bomberman for 64 and stuff. Like that, he's got
Yeah.
the kind of like going from planet to planet vibes. He's also like vaguely humanoid, but also like kind of non-threatening, but also is like named
Kind of
after.
chibi humanoid.
Yeah, like there's a comfort to that. I played a lot of Bomberman as like a kid. I don't know why, but I played like I
Yeah.
had a Bomberman game for like every console that had one that I owned, and played them a
Mhm.
lot. So I think there's a familiarity in there that would breed kind of a trust between me and Bomberman.
Yeah.
You know?
Bomberman feels like family.
Yeah,
Familial, you said.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, like
Alright.
defensive like Bomberman has a lot of. He can like kick those bombs around. He can throw them. He can like do a lot to kind of guide me and help me and protect me, which will be helpful as I go across these various planets. Because the only thing I can do is yell and hope they're the kind of aliens that get hurt by that. So
Sure. Now, I would warn you that he can only sort of do it in, the two directions.
I mean,
it's sort
depending on the
the
Bomberman,
core weakness of Bomberman, but yeah, I guess it
because
depends.
Bomberman, fucking what was it called? Not Bomberman Legends. It was Bomberman Adventure. I forget what it was called. There's Bomberman 64, which was the 2D one, but then there was a 3D.
I played that one.
There was the one that was like a 3D platformer. That was like.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
I also played the fuck out of.
I think we played that together.
Yeah,
one time.
I bought it when we bought our N64. I think I have both of them.
Hell
So yeah, basically, Bomberman, fucking great. Do it.
Yeah.
Go play your favorite. What's everyone's favorite Bomberman game? Question of the week.
And what's everybody's favorite Sonic the Hedgehog game? Can you answer both of those questions? I remember playing Bomberman on school computers when I wasn't supposed to.
Yeah, because
that's my memory of playing Bomberman.
Because I brought emulators on they were all legal.
Yep.
It was all had copies of
legal
everything.
emulators. All ripped. Yeah.
That I would leave on memory sticks in the computers in the band room, and that led to a bunch of people playing a bunch of stuff, which was fun. Yeah,
that's how I first played Spelunky and N.
Yep.
and so many games.
That's how I played StarCraft,
Unreal Tournament.
Oh man, Unreal Tournament was my shit in the band room. I would play a lot of Unreal Tournament. Anyway,
well,
take care of some business,
Niall. Yeah, thank you, and happy Halloween, everybody. I hope that this was a sort of spooky episode to kind of like. I guess it was kind of spooky.
Yeah.
It's eerie.
Yeah, weird aliens. It's always eerie.
Strange. Weird aliens. But yeah, I think it's time for us to get this fucking business knocked out of the park.
All right. So if you want to follow us on social media, we're on Twitter at IGW Podcast.
You can follow us on Facebook.com/It Gets Weird Podcast.
And we're on all your favorite podcatchers. If you listen to podcasts somewhere, look up It Gets Weird, and we're almost certainly there.
Twitch.tv/It Gets Weird. Come check it out. Give us a follow. We're playing video games. That's right. On the old Twitch.tv/It Gets Weird. We also have an email where you can email us about your Bomberman and Sonic the Hedgehog facts. itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. So please hit us up. We might read your email out on the show if you send us a good one. Just let us know how you want us to address you.
Yes.
And finally, but most importantly, patreon.com/itgetsweird. We have a $1 tier, a $2 tier, and a $5 tier. The $1 tier, you're just giving us a tip. You're saying, hey, I like your show. Thanks for doing what you do. You don't get anything out of it other than the satisfaction of helping out your favorite paranormal UFO show. $2 tier, though, you're going to start getting bonus content. It Gets Weird TV, where right now we are watching Neon Genesis Evangelion. People vote on the weird shows that we watch on this podcast. And right now we get to talk about Ava, and I'm talking all the weird conspiracy extraterrestrial shit going on there as we go through it. And then at the $5 tier, you get another bonus show where right now Niall and I are kind of just chatting about stuff that doesn't make it on the main show, stuff that isn't explicitly about one particular UFO topic or another. We're just shooting the shit, and I gotta tell you, we're having some good fucking conversations.
It's a lot of fun.
And there's a $5 tier. There's so much. There's an enormous back catalog of stuff to listen to. You have hundreds of hours of content. Whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to the main show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday. And you get access to the Discord where we're hanging out chatting with listeners. You can talk to us there directly. People are sharing their thoughts on UFOs, goblins, ghouls, and all kinds of Halloween spooks. If you can't donate, though, please tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird Podcast.
All right. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for continuing to support the show. This has been It Gets Weird, and I've been Niall.
And I've been Kyle.